Chapter 8, Part 3, Sexual Motivation and Behavior. Many factors, biological, psychological, social, and cultural, are involved in sexual motivation and behavior. What motivates sexual behavior? In most animals, sexual behavior is biologically determined and triggered by hormonal changes in the female. During the cyclical period known as estrus, a female animal is fertile and receptive to male sexual advances. As you go up the evolutionary scale, sexual behavior becomes less biologically determined and more subject to learning and environmental influences. A woman's fertility is regulated by monthly hormonal cycles, but these hormonal changes seem to have little or no effect on a female's sexual motivation. Even when a woman's ovaries, which produce the female sex hormone estrogen, are surgically removed or stop functioning during menopause, there is little or no drop in sexual interest. When human males experience lower levels of testosterone because of illness or castration, removal of the testes, a drop in sexual interest tends to occur, although the effects vary among individuals. In both men and women, sexual motivation is biologically influenced by levels of testosterone in the body. The stages of human sexual response. The human sexual response cycle was first mapped by sex research pioneers William Masters and Virginia Johnson during the 1950s and 60s. Their findings indicated that the human sexual response can be described as a cycle with 4 stages. Stage 1. Excitement. The beginning of sexual arousal is accompanied by a variety of bodily changes. Stage 2. Plateau. Physical arousal builds as pulse and breathing rates continue to increase. Stage 3. Orgasm. The third and shortest phase of the sexual response cycle. Blood pressure and heart rate reach their peak. Muscles contract rhythmically. Stage 4. Resolution. Arousal slowly subsides and returns to normal levels. The male experiences a refractory period, during which he is incapable of having another erection or orgasm. David Buss coordinated a large-scale survey of more than 10,000 people in 37 different cultures. Men and women across all 37 cultures generally agreed that they wanted a mate who was kind and understanding, intelligent, emotionally stable, and healthy, and who had a pleasing personality. Men were more likely to value youth and physical attractiveness. Women valued financial security, access to material resources, high status in education, and good financial prospects. Evolutionary psychology's explanation for these gender differences is that mating behavior is adaptive to the degree that it furthers the reproductive success of transmitting one's genes to the next generation and beyond. Sexual orientation refers to the direction of a person's emotional and erotic attraction. A heterosexual person is sexually attracted to individuals of the other sex, a homosexual person to individuals of the same sex, and a bisexual person to individuals of both sexes. The term homosexual can be applied to either males or females. Female homosexuals are usually called lesbians. Male homosexuals typically use the term gay. There is not always a perfect correspondence between a person's sexual identity, sexual desires, and sexual behavior. Determining the number of people who are homosexual or heterosexual is problematic for 2 reasons. Survey results vary depending on how the researchers define the terms homosexual, heterosexual, and bisexual. Gays and lesbians are not distributed evenly throughout the population. What determines sexual orientation? Evidence from twin studies suggests that genetics plays a role. Differences in brain structure between heterosexuals and homosexuals may play a role. Neurobiologist Simon LeVay discovered a small but significant difference between male heterosexuals and homosexuals in a tiny cluster of neurons in the hypothalamus, which is known to be involved in sexual behavior. However, LeVay points out that there's no way of knowing whether this difference is a cause of or is caused by homosexual behavior. In homosexual men and heterosexual women, the cluster was only half the size as in heterosexual men. According to results of Bell et al.'s comprehensive 1981 study, homosexuality is not due to an unpleasant early heterosexual experiences. Homosexuality is not the result of an abnormal relationship between the parents and the child. Several researchers now believe that sexual orientation is established as early as age 6. Male and female homosexuals are less likely than heterosexuals to have followed the typical pattern of gender-specific behaviors in childhood. Memories of childhood events may be biased, so such retrospective studies are less useful than prospective studies. Once sexual orientation is established, whether heterosexual or homosexual, it is highly resistant to change. It seems clear that no single factor determines whether people identify themselves as homosexual, heterosexual, or bisexual. Psychological, biological, social, and cultural factors are undoubtedly involved in determining sexual orientation. Sexual behavior. The National Health and Social Life Survey, a scientifically constructed national survey, provides information about different aspects of adult sexual behavior in the United States. Some of the survey's findings on the sexual practices of American adults follows. How many sex partners do people have? For most Americans, the onset of adulthood marks a commitment to the task of establishing long-term, intimate relationships. In people aged 30 to 50, about half have had 5 or more sexual partners. In contrast, only about a third of those over age 50 have had 5 or more sexual partners. Young adults today tend to become sexually active at an earlier age, marry at a later age, and have more sexual partners than members of older generations. The majority of people, about 80%, have had either one sexual partner or none in the preceding year. By age 30, about 90% of Americans have married. How often do people have sex? 1/3 of American adults have sex with a partner 2 or more times a week. 1/3 have sex a few times per month, and 1/3 have sex a few times a year or not at all. Married or cohabitating couples have the most active sex lives. About 85% of the survey respondents reported that they were physically and emotionally satisfied with their sexual relationships. What do people do when they have sex? In terms of actual practices, vaginal intercourse is nearly universal as the most practiced sexual activity among heterosexual couples. More than 2/3 have engaged in oral sex. Fewer have ever engaged in anal sex. Regardless of age, at least 90% of women found no appeal in being forced or forcing someone else to do something sexual. Receiving anal intercourse, having a same-gender sex partner, and having sex with a stranger. Except for having sex with a stranger, 90% of men agreed with the above. How common are sexual problems? The National Health and Social Life Survey found the following. The incidence of sexual dysfunction among adult Americans was much higher than previously believed. 43% of women and 31% of men suffered from sexual problems. For women, the most common sexual problems were low sexual desire and arousal problems, including female orgasmic disorder. For men, the most common sexual problems were premature ejaculation and male erectile disorder. Sexual problems were most common among young women in men older than age 50. Stress and emotional problems were associated with sexual difficulties. This ends this part of the chapter.